I'm just here to introduce this meeting of the President's Task Force on the Environment. The task force thought that this was an appropriate time to bring more of the community in and to communicate with you about what they have been doing, what our plans are for the college, and how important this is, especially for our future together as a college and, of course, as a society. I just want to talk a little bit about why this is important for me, certainly, and for us at Holy Cross. The first thing I'd like to say is this actually is personal for me. When I first got out of college, and this was before most of the other speakers were born, I think, in 1969, I went to work in the Southwest in Colorado and New Mexico. I was working mainly with Native Americans down there, which doesn't pay a lot. So I actually had some summer and part-time jobs working with a group that built solar-heated houses. And they were really interesting designs. They were passive solar heat, so there were no moving parts, but there were ways of collecting the heat and then storing it, sometimes in huge banks of water or in beds of rocks and so on, and then releasing the heat into the house as it was needed. And of course in New Mexico especially, it's a great technology to have because it gets very cold up there. It's high, it's over a mile high, but there is lots of sun. So, and in fact the first scientific paper I ever published was on it was some experiments comparing different liquids for their efficiency and safety in being able to collect and circulate heat. And the company was doing a number of other very interesting things on doing environmentally friendly design. I worked on one house that was it was called a Zome. It was something, a later version of a geodesic dome, and very highly insulated, very tight, and all solar heated. It also had its own water tank, and it was fed by a well, and they used a windmill to actually pump the water, so they never used any electricity on that. And we had a number of other features that were trying to reduce the impact on the environment back in 1970 or so. And of course, living in the Southwest, which is a very, very beautiful and vast, but also very fragile environment, you get a deep appreciation for how dependent we are on the environment and how easily we can disrupt it and degrade it. And certainly water is a critical resource there. And one of my other part-time jobs I had there was to do research on water rights, because that water means life in that environment. And there isn't enough for everybody. And you're also trading off some people's wanting these lush lawns versus being able to have enough resources for economic activity that would provide jobs for people versus people just being able to live and have enough water to survive. So it was a great education for me in learning how much we're dependent on the environment, what impact our actions have, and how we have to make choices that really matter in terms of people's lives. And I think that's the bottom line on this, that when we talk about protecting the environment, it's not just motivated by this mystical love for nature or reverence for the planet, all of which is very important, but it really is about being able to sustain civilization and providing a quality of life and survivability for our people. And in fact, we know historically that when there are periods of great environmental stress, then civilization starts to break down, and we have wars, and we have dislocations of population, and we have tremendous poverty, and all the social ills we're dealing with. And a lot of those fundamentally are based on in environmental issues. We see this in Africa right now, and we've seen it throughout history. So for anyone who cares for one another, I think protecting the environment and building a sustainable world has to be a part of that caring. I think that's why for the Jesuits and in the Catholic Church, protection of the environment has risen to the top as an apostolic priority. At our last general congregation about a year and a half ago, in the spring of 2008, in the decree on mission that was released at that time, the environment was one of maybe half a dozen priorities that Jesuits were asked to give importance in their work. In the decree on mission from the 35th General Congregation, it harkened back actually to the previous congregation where this had become. And I'll give you a little quote from this. They said, following the directive of GC 34, Father Peter Hans Kolvenbach, who was at that time the Superior General of the Society, commissioned a study and invited all, and now I quote, Jesuits and those who share our mission to show ever more effective ecological solidarity in our spiritual, communal, and apostolic lives. And that ends their quote. They go on to say, this invitation calls us to move beyond doubts and indifference to take responsibility for our home, the earth. They go on to say, care of the environment affects the quality of our relationships with God, with other human beings, and with creation itself. It touches the core of our faith in and love for God, from whom we come and towards whom we are journeying. It might be said that St. Ignatius teaches us this care of the environment in the Principle and Foundation, coming out of spiritual exercises, when speaking of the goodness of creation, as well as in the Contemplatio ad Amorum at the end, when describing the active presence of God within creation. So certainly for us Jesuits and for us as a Jesuit institution, the environment holds a very important place in our mission and in our consciousness and in our efforts. That's why when I had an opportunity to become a part of the American College and University President's climate commitment, I was quite willing to sign. And so we became a charter signer in this effort, which now has something over 650 colleges participating. Now you'll hear more about that as we go on, but what appeals to me is that it brings us together to work toward a very important goal, namely to bring about carbon neutrality, at least within our own institutions, and we hope within the larger society, by approximately mid-century. That was the stated goal. And so the basic approach was to ask us to, number one, set up structures that facilitate our institution's participation in that. And that's, of course, why we have the President's Task Force on the Environment. And I'm very, very grateful that Scott Merrill and Professor Catherine Keel have been willing to take on leadership for that, and Jane Dorham before them, and to all those who serve on the task force. Second, we were asked to inventory our carbon emissions, and we've done that. That's in our report. And then to put in, to come up with a plan to reach carbon neutrality by about 2040 or so. And then, of course, they asked for immediate action steps, which we were able to do. And finally, they have a system of reporting. And our last report was about a month ago to file our action plan for carbon neutrality. We did it on time. I think a lot of people asked for for extensions, but we have a great team, so we were able to get this done. So I'm very, very happy to introduce Scott Merrill, who will tell us a little bit more about your work. Scott?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of a beautiful afternoon to attend this information about the new carbon neutral plan for the college. I just first want to just give a little background on the task force for the environment. Father actually formed the task force back in 2003, and its original purpose back then was to audit our environmental practices at the college and try to make some recommendations to improve our operations in environmental matters and how we go about doing business at the college. So even before this, the carbon neutral plan idea came along, we were definitely making steps in the right direction there. In 2007, when Father signed on, he amended the responsibilities for the task force to develop and implement this carbon neutral plan for the college, and that's kind of what we've been doing since fall of 2007. As Father mentioned, first putting an inventory together, and then after getting the inventory set, working towards developing the plan. What I'd like to do now is introduce the folks that have been working very hard on this. I'm not going to go write all the names, but I would ask that members of the task force that are here today just to be stand and recognized. So thank you. I'd also like to recognize a consultant that's been working with us from the beginning on this, Dorothy Austin from Golder Associates. Dorothy was working with us, the physical plant, before any of this was going. She does work for us on filing reports with the Department of Environmental Protection, to keep them to be our friends instead of our enemies. So she's been doing a great job there. But she put in a lot of work and effort with the task force to kind of, a lot of numbers have to be crunched to come up with what your carbon inventory is. That kind of goes over the head of quite a few of us here. So she's been doing a bang-up job for us. At this time, I'd like to introduce, as Father mentioned, our co-chair, Kathy Keel, Associate Professor of Economics, who kind of walk us through a little more detail of the actual carbon plan. Kathy?
Thank you. Father's done a great job of outlining what the carbon neutral plan was. I'm just going to go through in a few more details so you can see where it is that we're starting from, what we've already done, and what we have left to do. And our hope is that we'll be able to start some conversations with you about suggestions that you have about how we can finish the work that the task force has started. So here's the climate commitment requirements. As Father said, that when he signed on to the agreement, these are all the steps that the college agreed that they would undertake. And here's the timeline. And so most recently on September 15th, we did submit our carbon neutral plan, actually on time without an extension. And we are required by the agreement to publicly report every 2 years. And our hope is that we really make sure that the college community is well aware of what's going on. We're trying to make everything as transparent as possible so that everyone in the campus can be involved. As you could see from the list of the people who are on the task force, we draw from across the campus community, faculty, staff, students, everybody. And so we're really hoping that everybody will be able to get involved and be able to contribute. The first thing we had to do after signing was to agree to 2 immediate actions, and out of a list of several, these were the 2 that the college chose to undertake. So we have agreed that for every building that is built on campus from here going forward, it will be a silver LEED equivalent, which has some environmental requirements that it has to meet and is to be energy efficient. The second action is that all new appliances that will be purchased by the college have to be Energy Star, have to have the Energy Star label from the EPA. So again, they're going to be energy efficient. So once those two steps were agreed upon, what we needed to do next was to come up with our carbon assessment to know where the carbon was coming from, then to make decisions about how much we were going to reduce and how we were going to reduce it. One thing that the task force all agreed on was that we would follow this hierarchy, which was set up by the ACUPCC. I actually said it, practiced that 5 times, in terms of how to prioritize our actions. And so what they suggested that we focus on first was trying to avoid the production of greenhouse gases, including carbon, and that would be the major focus. Then reducing and replacing them would be less important. And the final suggestion was that you try to minimize offsets. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, an offset is when we as a college would pay some other entity or group to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and then we would get credit for it because we paid for it. And the task force agreed that that would be our last choice, that we would prefer to do as much as we can on campus with our energy use before we go to paying someone else to do it. But you could just keep that in the back of your mind. It's an option, but this is the way we wanted to do it. So Dorothy did our inventory, helped us with our inventory, and I just wanted people to see basically where our greenhouse gases, our carbon, is coming from, what is generating it. And so the biggest part of the pie is the blue, the 45%, and that's from on-campus stationary source fuel use. So that's fuel use by our boilers, engines, furnaces, water heaters, cooktops, things of that nature. Our second big chunk, the purple chunk at 39%, is purchased electricity. And I'll talk in a minute about the company that we purchase the electricity from, how it's generated. The third then is commuting in terms of students, faculty, and staff. Air travel is a relatively small part, refrigerant and institution-owned and controlled vehicles. So when we sit down to tackle the problem, the two big things we're going to be looking at is on-campus stationary source fuel use and purchased electricity. For those of you who like to see these kinds of numbers, here's all the details on the exact numbers of the emissions. All of this information is available on our website. I mentioned the campus electricity. We get our power, comes from lots and lots of different sources. You'll see that our number one source is natural gas, and that's good. Number 2 is hydro, also good. We do get some from wind, from nuclear, and from biomass, but we do also get some from coal and from oil. And that's where we're getting some of our carbon emissions. So having done the inventory, our next step then was to set goals. And we wanted to set goals that were both achievable, but at the same time pushed the community, instead of picking goals that we could do sort of easily and be done. We wanted to make sure that it was indeed somewhat of a challenge, but a reasonable challenge. And so here are the goals that the task force came to. The first one is our short-term goal, which is to reduce carbon production by 20% from our 2000 inventory levels by the year 2015. Our long-term goal then is to achieve carbon neutrality between 2030 and 2040. And the third goal that we have is sort of an overarching goal, which is to create a more sustainable culture on campus. And by that, what we mean is that we want to make sure that everybody on campus is aware of their use of carbon and are doing what they can do in order to decrease it and are just more conscious of the way that we make decisions and the way that we run things. So let me just talk a little bit about the short-run goal, the 20% reduction. How are we going to go about achieving this, this reduction? And these are the three main things that we're going to work on. Switching the boiler plant for the fuel source, and that gives us a reasonable decrease in our carbon usage. Equipment replacement and upgrades. John Cannon will be talking about that in just a minute. And those, again, also give us a reasonable decrease. And then campus community sustainable culture change. These are behavioral changes which have to occur at every level on campus in order for us to get the reduction that we need. So I think this is a helpful graph. If you look at, here's the reduction coming over the 2015, and you can see that all three of the parts play an important role. So we can fuel switch, and that's going to help. We can do changes in electricity usage and the way we obtain electricity. That helps. But behavioral changes also are going to play an important role. And that's not something that we can mandate. That's something that the community has to agree that they're going to undertake. How are we going to achieve the long-run goals, carbon neutrality by 2030 or 2040? We've made a list of things that we want to do, but we also feel that short of buying offsets, a lot of the reduction is going to have to come about because of changes in technology and changes in behavior. And so it's the task force will continue to work across campus to try to find ways that we can make these reductions. But here's a picture of the gold line is what would happen to our carbon emissions if the campus grew at a reasonable rate over the up till 2040. And then the blue dotted line is what it is that we're hoping to do. And I hope that people see that as a really positive graph and not a that can't be done. We believe on the task force that it is doable. It's just going to take a lot of hard work. Having said that, I will let John talk about some of the things that we've already done on campus to try to reduce our carbon.
Thank you, Kathy. I think I get the funnest part of this. I get to show all the stuff we did. But that's not my picture. But it is what it feels like sometimes doing this. That's why it's kind of symbolic to me. It shows the hike that we have ahead of us. So what I'm going to show you is a number of projects that you may or may not have noticed on campus. And the first few, you can see the actual savings. And if you remember Kathy's chart, and it showed the many thousands of metric tons of carbon that we have to reduce, you can see the kind of numbers that these changes make, and think of how many changes we have to make to get there. So the first one is we changed out the lighting in the ice rink. And you can see the energy savings, and then 9 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. But on top of that, it's also better lighting. These lights will come on instantly. It's not like the old type of lights where if there's a power glitch, it takes them a while to come back. So there's a lot of other advantages to these things we do, too. Swords Library has all new lighting. That one is actually a better savings because it was older lights that were in there, or less efficient. We changed the ice rink chiller. And this thing, I think, runs like a third of the time compared to the old one. So there's some pretty nice savings on that. Basketball court lighting, same as the rink lighting. And then we changed the lighting in the field house as well. And in the hard corridors. And the parking garage, we're going to be starting that either today, tomorrow, or any day now. And that's an interesting one because the parking garage is, maybe 5-6 years old now. But look at the change in technology. We're going to be putting LED lights in there, which were not readily available back when we built it 5 or 6 years ago. And look at the difference by putting them in now. So when you take all those projects and you add them up together, that's 148 metric tons, which is, it's good. It's a great thing to do, but it's 7.4% of the goal we have for 2015. Now, there's other things that we've done, and obviously things that we're going to do. Not everything is as easily quantifiable, so I'm going to show you a list of other projects that we've done, and they all contribute. So we have, I show the picture of the computer, but much of this college, and it's growing every year, is controlled by an energy management system. And what that allows us to do is to, say in the winter, it allows us to let buildings go cooler at night, or in the summer, warmer at night. It gives us computer control, so we have many ways to try and save energy. There's certain areas where you can use outdoor cooling and it'll control that. So it gives us a lot of opportunities. You may not see that or know what's happening, but it's a behind-the-scenes thing that every year it's saving us some. If you're around in the summer and you see us digging up the ground everywhere, not only are we fixing the steam pipes, but we're putting in more efficient steam pipes, so there's less energy lost there. We've done some other classroom lighting in sporadic motion sensors. Except Wheeler Hall, we did the entire building, and that seems to be working out very well. We put new boiler controls on the boilers. If you look at that small box on the right, that happens to be what it is. But in terms of operation, it's huge because it watches the flame better. It can tell the boiler what to do, and so it uses a lot less energy when the boiler point runs. On top of that, everybody's heard about Trayless, but I don't think people have really seen the numbers in what it saves. And you can see the food waste, liquid waste. Those numbers are great. And even the water usage. We have the water usage. That could be calculated further to show the amount of energy that's been saved for heating that water. And then I want to talk about recycling just briefly, but one of the things that, if you notice, it wasn't in the inventory. All of our waste right now goes to a trash-to-energy plant. So in doing the calculation for the carbon inventory, it basically comes out a net zero because it's making electricity from what's taken from here. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be recycling, doesn't mean the task force is not looking at recycling and coming up with better ways to do it, but it just doesn't show up on the inventory. But we actually have in the last, not this past fiscal year, 150 tons we recycled from campus. We had an opportunity for an e-waste collection day back in 2008. Didn't happen this year because of the economy. The sponsors weren't there like they were the year before. But you can see we took out 105,000 pounds, and that was advertised to the surrounding community as well. And then we're planning to start an education campaign, and then we also have a paper minimization. Those of you who've been in the library, I know there's processes that make it print many different times. People hit print because they don't think the document's coming out. So there's some software that's been studied to avoid that, and so you actually have to release your print job, and then you'll get one job instead of multiple jobs. I think most people have heard about the garden. The interesting point about this is how this happened. It started in a philosophy class, and then that was brought to the task force. So that's kind of the purpose that people should keep in their mind of the task force now. When you have ideas, we have a process in place to bring the ideas to the task force so we can help with them, evaluate them, and hopefully if it's a good idea, do whatever it takes to make it happen. That's essentially what happened with the garden. So that's what I have. Now I'd like to introduce Maria and Elena, and they're going to tell us what the student groups have been doing.
So do you want to start? Okay. So as new members of the task force, I'd first like to, I think for the both of us, applaud you guys for all the great things that you've done in the past few years. We've really made, I think, big waves with the environment here on campus. But just to talk a little bit about what me and Maria do is, I'm trying to think what I would say. Okay. As we're also leaders on campus for the environment. So we're here to kind of represent the student body and, talk about what the student body's concerns are for the environment and, the initiatives that we want to take as students. So SGA and ECO have been working together a lot this year to start implementing these new ideas. I think our goal is to really just educate students and make them more aware of environmental concerns that we have.
And so I thought I would use this opportunity to promote a couple of events coming up right in the next week, and also to demonstrate that Eco Action and SGA as well are very engaged both on campus and, in a larger way civically engaged as pertains to the environment. And so it's a great organization, both our organizations, to get involved in. So this Saturday is actually, as some of you may know, 350, the International Day of Climate Action. And there are actually, this is now incorrect because as of now there are apparently around 4,500 actions occurring in over 170 countries, and one of those is in Worcester at the Genesis Club, and it's an energy barn raising, which essentially is just a community weatherization of a building. And the Genesis Club, as some of you also may know, is a really great organization that provides a community space for people living with mental illness. So we'll be making that building much more energy efficient this Saturday, and you can still sign up online, but several EcoAction members will be volunteering that day. And then next week, EcoAction and SGA together are sponsoring Reduce, Reuse, Participate, which the idea initially came from knowing that this town hall would be occurring as a way for students to follow up and then pledge to do their part to help Holy Cross achieve carbon neutrality through behavioral modifications. But we'll also be incorporating a Massachusetts ballot question initiative, which will limit carbon dioxide from biomass plants to 250 pounds per megawatt hour. So we'll have that petition there, and we'll also have a national petition in support of the Clean Energy Jobs and American Power Act that's being debated in the Senate right now. And we'll be giving out organic US-made Halloween candy, and we'll be raffling off gift cards. So there's a lot of cool reasons to stop by our table in Hogan every day next week.
Come pledge.
And if you would like to get involved with either of our organizations, you can email ecoaction@holycross.edu or join SGA's Facebook group. And I just want to mention, with the Copenhagen Climate Talks starting on December 7th, expect November to be an exciting month for student involvement as well. So hopefully you'll want to get involved.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the other initiatives that are going on campus. We obviously have physical plant very involved. We have the students very involved. We also have the unique opportunity, being at a college, in order to bring students together with educators to help the students learn about environmental problems, how such problems are thought about in different disciplines and different areas, and think about possible solutions. So for students, it's possible to have an environmental studies major or an environmental studies concentrator. If you're interested in either one of those, you can contact Professor Lauren Cass in CISS. He's actually in poli-sci. You can also take courses both in your major and out of your major. And so I've listed, and I'm sure I've forgotten, I've also math and physics. I'm sure I've still left someone else out. But in departments across campus, you can take classes where you can look at environmental issues. For the environmental studies majors, there are often capstone projects. And these are student design projects which allow the student to tie in, if they choose to do so, real-world problems and real-world issues. And it's a chance to really get out of the theory parts of your classes and into the applied things that you might want to look at. So a perfect example of this is something like the gardens that John talked about. Also the wind turbine. So the wind turbine project came out of a math class taught by Professor Catherine Roberts. The students decided that they wanted to look at the feasibility of putting a wind turbine on campus. And so they did a lot of the quantifying of the different issues. They took the problem to Father McFarlane and pitched it to him, is the way Catherine put it to me. And he agreed to increase the study. And so a wind tower was put up. This wind speed was monitored. As it turns out, unfortunately, the size wind turbine that we would be allowed to have by the City of Worcester is just at this point not economically feasible. But the college still remains interested in the possibility and is looking to see what happens to the price of energy and things like that. We're also investigating partnering with with someone else off campus to see if that would be a good way for us to look at it. But if there are things that students are interested in, so questions like how can you design the recycling bin placement in dorms to increase student recycling, that would be a great project. There's all kinds of things like that we the task force is happy to help with, as well as your regular faculty. So where do we go from here? A lot of work has been done, but we're still not at the 2015 goal. And so we've listed, as the task force has listed, various things that still need to be done. And what we're hoping at this point in time, and the reason why we wanted to have this town hall meeting, was we're hoping that everyone outside the task force now can get more involved. We'll come up with suggestions, with things that seem obvious to them that we haven't thought of, or that we just weren't aware that people would be willing to do. And so we're really hoping that the rest of the community now steps forward and starts to think about what can they do to help. We did make a list of some suggestions just so that you can take away some things that you can do. If you're the last person out of the room, turn off the lights and shut the windows. The shorter, cooler showers, reducing appliance usage, just being aware of how much energy you use and trying to cut back. We don't need to have everything on all the time. Closing the windows in the winter, recycling, and then being creative, thinking about things that you can do, getting involved in some sort of group. We're hoping that faculty and staff will also feel free to contact the task force and to get more involved. As I said earlier, we're hoping to make this as transparent as possible. We do have a sustainability website that Public Affairs has worked to put together, where you can do things like access our carbon neutral plan. The link is on the bottom of that page. Go to the ACUPCC website and see what other schools are doing. Go to the ASHE website and see what other schools are doing. And there's also, I think on this, you can contact us and give us feedback. In addition, we have an email address, environment@holycross.edu, and we'd be happy to, if you want to email us or contact us in any way. One of the real strengths, I think, of the task force is something comes in and immediately we all have a pretty good idea who's the best person to get that email, and things don't get lost in the netherlands of email, but we'll actually get it to the right person so that they can focus it. Okay. That ends our presentation, and what we're hoping now is if you have questions or concerns or comments, we would like to hear from you.